everyone, welcome back to my channel. I'm Lily. This is my first video in quite a while and I've not been very productive recently, and I just wanted to apologise for that really. I've got lots of videos planned though, so I really am hoping on actually getting them filmed and edited and online, especially now it's Christmas holidays for me, so I've got a lot more time. The last couple of weeks have just been a bit really busy and stressful for all different reasons, and I've also had my mum living with me for a couple of weeks, which has been nice but very strange. I've not lived with my mum since I was about 18 and I'm 25 now, by the way, so yeah, it's been a bit odd, and I'm surprisingly nervous about filming around her while she's here because I don't know, very self-conscious and I don't want her listening to me, and yeah, it's really weird. And also last week was the last week of term for my school, and Ofsted turned up, which was a bit of a surprise, but also like, yeah, as you can imagine if you know anything about Ofsted and what it's like to be staff in a school that's being inspected by Ofsted. So yeah, but moving on, I did do non-fiction November. I did a non-fiction November TBR, and I had like 12 books in that TBR, which is ridiculous because I said in that video that I never actually meant to read all of those books. It's very ambitious even for me. I think I read on average between 4 and 6 books a month, so I knew picking 12 books, it was more a case of choosing a selection that I could then choose from. I ended up reading 2 of those books, and 2 books that weren't even on that list at all. So, and I was quite pleased with what I did. They were all travel and natural history books. The first one is Doubling Back, 10 Paths Trodden in Memory by Cracknell, and this one I picked up because at the beginning of the year I read Cracknell's novel, Call of the Undertow. And I loved it, and I loved the detail she went into about the natural world and cartography and the way she crafted her characters and the plot and the way she dealt with setting. I just really loved that, and I thought if anybody could write a travel kind of memoir, then she could. And they're about Cracknell's not walks that she's done for the first time, but walks she's rewalking, either in the footsteps of others or of herself, and she's reflecting on how those things have changed and how she's changed. And it's quite a reflective and deeply personal book. I think it felt a lot like reading a diary, but I just found some of the stories, the walks, they were repetitive. And once we kind of left the UK and familiar grounds that I could use my own experiences of walking in those places myself, I found that the description was quite lacking. I couldn't really picture anything, and it was a lot of repetitive detail that didn't really show an image, if that makes sense. I just felt like I got quite bored, honestly. In the middle I was like, oh, when is it over? And I cheated, I'm sorry. I did carry on with my Harry Potter reread, and so I was finishing off Harry Potter at the same time. So I dipped in and out of Harry Potter while reading this one just to get me through it. So this one was a little bit disappointing. I did enjoy it. I think it might be one I might return to, but I'm not sure that these kind of walks really work as a complete collection. They just become too repetitive. The next book that I read was Names for the Sea, Strangers in Iceland by Sarah Moss, and this one I've been looking forward to for so long because Iceland and Nordic countries and Greenland and all those kind of places really fascinate me. I really like cool places, and I've heard a lot of really great things about this book, and it was really great to get into. I think Sarah Moss has got a great writing style. It was very conversational. She and her family moved to Iceland for a year. I think it was 2011, I can't remember. 2009, I was close. And it was just after Iceland had a financial crisis. So it wasn't the greatest time to be there, and it was really fascinating to see their struggles and their culture shock and how they were adjusting to life there, and how they ended up really missing it when they left. I really liked this book, but I did think it lacked a lot of the personal. It was almost the polar opposite of Doubling Back in some ways, because this book gave a lot of great detail about people, like one of the things I felt was a big flaw in doubling back was that the people she met along her travels, I couldn't connect with them at all. I couldn't really visualise them. Their stories were a bit damp, I guess. Whereas Sarah Moss, she really can tell other people's stories very well. My main problem with that was, while she could tell the stories well, she didn't really paint the people very well, I don't think. Like, there were so many names in here and they all just blurred together. Her husband was barely present, which quite surprised me. We never got to see any kind of conversations between Sarah and her husband about their move, about what it felt like, any stress. And her husband, he doesn't have a job for quite a while, so I could imagine that'd be quite lonely and difficult for him, having just his small children to look after in a very strange place. So I think I wanted to see more of them as a family and how it affected them as a unit, but we didn't really get that at the beginning anyway. I didn't really see them as a family. So that was my kind of one disappointment, really, was that the personal stuff just didn't really happen in this book, but everything else was really great. And that leads me to the next book, which was William Fiennes' The Snow Geese, and this was one of my predicted 5-star reads. It very almost got it. I think I gave this 4.5 stars. William Fiennes' writing is always beautiful. Like, the way he describes the landscape and people and animals and behaviour and emotions, just like it's flawless and just like so effortless. I love his writing. I think with this book, though, you could tell it was a diary. There was quite a few repeated phrases that I thought, oh, this was a really great line, until you repeated it. This book is about William Fiennes just after he spent quite a long time in hospital when he was a young man. He had, I think it was bowel trouble and things like that, and he had to have several operations, and he spent a long time in hospital. And when he got home, he was so relieved, but at the same time, he just wanted to get out. So he found an old childhood book of his that he really loved as a child called Snow Geese, which is and he did all this research on snow geese and their migrations, and he wanted to follow snow geese on their migration north into Baffin Island. But in contrast to the other books I read, this book was over personal, I felt. We had a lot of the deeply introspective stuff about William himself and how his journey was a reflection of him trying to find home, but also leaving home, and this battle of homesickness. And it's a really beautiful journey, and I love the people he meets. He's very good at describing their character and personalities, but presenting it without judgment, which was one of the things I really struggle with Sarah Moss, is that we get so much of her judging people that she's meeting. He's so great at writing about people, and it wasn't like their stories. Like Sarah Moss, she specifically talked about people in her books who had really great and interesting stories about like the history of Iceland, or really interesting hobbies. Like there was a lady in there who can talk to the hidden people and things like that. Whereas William Fiennes, he meets all these really crazy and interesting and fascinating people, and he just presents them as they were presented to him, with no judgment, and it's just wonderful to see. Like, I just loved it, and the conversations were brilliant. But the one thing that kind of let this one down for me, I think, was it didn't feel like it really had an ending. I know it's a journey from one place to another place. William, he goes home, and that's kind of it. And I think I wanted a bit more of reflection from when he was home about what his journey meant to him and how it affected him, and his new thoughts on homesickness and things like that. I think I just wanted a bit more, and I think it was the same actually with The Music Room, which was his first memoir about growing up with his brother who had epilepsy. And that book finishes just before this one starts, but at no point during this book do we get any mention of his brother, and it just felt a little bit odd, like they just didn't really connect, but also both of them lacked that kind of solid ending where it just felt like a cut rather than like it actually ended. So all those books had like little flaws that I was just thinking like, oh, if I combined them all together, they'd be great. And then I read this, which basically did that, and that is Adventures of a Young Naturalist by David Attenborough, The Zoo Quest Expeditions. And this book is a collection of David Attenborough's journals, which were originally published in the 1950s, just after he'd done each of his Zoo Quest expeditions, which, if you don't know much about David Attenborough, you really should. His programmes are amazing, and this book is incredible. It combines all the things I loved about each of the 3 previous books, but without any of the flaws. Like, this book is completely flawless in my opinion, apart from some like dated political correctness issues and things like that, which I'm glad were not edited out actually, because I think that would leave a false impression of the past. I was really quite surprised because I thought that his books would be quite dense, full of information and quite hard to get through, and especially this book's quite a chunker. I was a bit worried about starting it, but it's a library book. I saw it in the library and I picked it up and I was like, I want to read this. I just want to read it. But it's amazing. He reminds me of like an actual real life Newt Scamander in some ways. He's got this wonderful wit and charm, and he just effortlessly describes his journeys and the people he meets and their stories and personalities and the characters of the animals and his feelings about like being miserable in a rainforest in your hammock just collapsing into the mud slowly through the night and things like that. And I just loved every minute of this book. It was so wonderful and it felt a lot more like a story. It was just seamless, and it was so warming to read somehow. I really recommend this, especially if you're into natural history and travel writing. He's just so fun and accessible, and just like you can never be bored with this. It's beautiful, and his writing is just so wonderful. So yeah, this ended up being my favourite book of the entire month, and I gave this one 5 stars. And I love David Attenborough. He's like, oh man, please never die. Please never die. So I only read those 4 non-fiction books in November. It was a little less than I wanted to, but I think because David Attenborough's book is quite a big one, and I'm quite keen to carry on reading non-fiction throughout other months, and especially my goal next year, I know it was my goal this year as well, was to read more non-fiction, but I think for 2018 I would really love to read at least 1 non-fiction book a month, or maybe 2 months, I don't know. 1 non-fiction book a month would be really good. The only other book that I read in November was one I actually started in October. This took me a month to read. This is why I don't read long books, but Harry Potter is a special case. So I've been doing my Harry Potter reread, and this book, I really love this. I love the kind of jump from the first 3 to this one, where we get suddenly a lot more detail and description and more time in classes and with other characters and all the different developments, and I really love it. The only thing that's still annoying me is the whole Slytherin hate, and just like how all bad guys are just so obvious and like not very nuanced. But my exception to this is Barty Crouch Jr., and I have theories about him. So I'm planning on doing a video completely dedicated to my Harry Potter reread at some point, where I'm going to be discussing my thoughts on what it's like to read Harry Potter for the first time as an adult, because it's really strange. I feel like I'm definitely empathising a lot more with the teachers and the parents and Molly Weasley. Oh my gosh, Molly Weasley is a saint. So I have a lot of thoughts, and also like things that I just forgotten were in the books. And I've also been watching each of the films whenever I finish a book, so the kind of contrast between actually what the film did well and what the film didn't do well has been quite interesting, because I feel like I didn't really think about that when I was a kid. So I'm looking forward to that, and I'm currently now about 200 pages into The Order of the Phoenix. This one is going a lot slower, so so I might well do like a 2-part video of this, where I discuss the first 4 books together, and then I discuss the later books in a separate video whenever I finish them, because that might be some time away. But yeah, November was a really good month for me, I think, especially considering all the things that were going on. I watched quite a few people's November wrap-ups, especially if they're doing non-fiction November, but let me know if you have read any of these books in the past and what you thought of them. I know Names for the Sea is quite well read on BookTube, so I'd love to hear people's opinions on that and what you thought. But yeah, so hopefully I will be back a bit more. I'm planning on filming at least 4 videos today, so that means I will have like a backlog to edit, which would be great. So I'm hoping you will see more from me in the next couple of weeks leading up to Christmas. Yay! So that's all from me today. I hope you're having a great week before Christmas. Goodbye!